Hello and welcome to My Emotional Armor, the podcast where we discuss the effects of covert narcissistic parenting. I am your host, Cindy Koo, a survivor and robot warrior here to share the ways emotional armor can help you heal, stay safe, and regain your sense of self. Hello, my robot friends. I hope you're all doing well today. I'd like to start by dedicating today's episode to a listener named Bella. She was brave enough to reach out and share her story with me. So Bella lives with and is caregiver for her covert narcissistic mother, which, as you can imagine, is incredibly difficult on a daily level. She wanted to know what to do in this situation when you just cannot get away. And I must admit, I have been at a loss as to how to answer her. I am not a psychologist, and all I really can offer here is my personal experience. So for me to even try to put myself in her shoes just didn't feel right. I did find an episode from Dr. Ramani, who I've mentioned before, on caregiving for narcissists specifically, which I did send to Bella and will also include here in the show notes. But I found myself wondering, what else can I do? What else can I say about this? Surely there must be a through line here. And that is really the basis of this episode. Though I can't speak to Bella's hardships specifically, I can speak to the strength that she and all survivors of covert narcissistic trauma possess. There are some key gifts, or superpowers, as I'm calling it in this episode, that you've gained from your experience. And I'm not saying your childhood with a CNP was a good thing, that this is all for some grand, amazing reason. I actually take a lot of issue with that stance. It's not one that helps me personally. If it does for you, that is great. By all means, please hold on to and use whatever inner wise words help you get through the day. But the reason I personally have a problem with this all happened for a good reason is because it implies that the childhood and sense of self you sacrificed was all for a greater good. That having a covert narcissistic parent was right in some universal way. And I simply don't believe that. I don't believe any part of it was right or okay. In fact, I think this reasoning skips over the very real pain you felt and tries to fast track your trauma to a nice, tidy end result where everything happens for a reason. Life's not that cut and dry, in my opinion. The fact is, you were born into a family with one or more covert narcissistic parents. This is not a situation you choose or would choose given the chance. But because there are two sides to everything, even pain, you've developed some unique talents. There's a quote from Tony Robbins that sums this up. I know there are a lot of polarizing opinions on him, and even if you don't ascribe to his teaching, I do think there's relevancy in this one piece of advice. And it is, if you're going to blame people for all the shit, you better blame them for all the good too. If you're going to give them credit for everything that's fucked up, then you have to give them credit for everything that's great. I'm not asking you to stop blaming. I'm saying blame elegantly, blame intelligently, blame effectively. I like that quote because it addresses the blame that is rightfully yours to give, but it also honors the good that your CNP instilled in you and the strength you've developed in dealing with them. In some ways, you have this bulletproof nature to you. You've likely developed a quiet tenacity that's so potent and apparent, you don't even need to be showy about it. It's because it's a part of your soul. The CNP has to talk constantly about their sacrifice and fortitude, but not you. It's just there, and you show it through your actions. In fact, because those with CNPs are highly empathic, chances are you have a sweet and nice demeanor or affectation. But inside of you, you hold this hardened core of courage. I'm reminded of someone I know who has a covert narcissist in her life. And we actually don't talk about it a lot, but she'll mention it if it comes up. And I am in absolute awe of how she just pushes through it while being a single mom and while running her own business. The other superpower you likely developed as a result of being raised by a CNP is resilience to criticism and rejection. Now, this really sucks to say, but you got used to being put down a lot by your parent. So as you became an adult, you naturally faced more criticism at school and at work, such as the natural course of life. No one's perfect, and you're going to be told from time to time how to improve. There are times where it was constructive and other times where it was not. But even in the times where the criticism was harsh, I'm willing to bet that it didn't hurt as much as when it was being delivered by your mom and dad. So by comparison, any shit that anyone else wanted to say about you was essentially not that bad. Being raised by a CNP, you developed a thick skin, and that's definitely why you've been able to forge ahead and have a good life despite your childhood. Another virtue you possess is patience. You have had to get through, breathe through, and listen to so much growing up with a CNP. How many tirades have you sat through? How many empty apologies have you heard? How many years have you waited for them to change? And look, you are still here, and you still have love even for your parent. That's patience, and that's strength you won't get from a seminar or the self-help section. That's a skill you develop throughout your whole life. You know it's just waiting, and you know deeply the saying, this too shall pass. Next gift. Oh, I've got a whole list, Bella. I told you this episode was for you. You know how to be alone. This may not sound like a gift, but you'd be surprised how many people feel very uncomfortable in their own company. In fact, I was just talking to my mom yesterday. I recently came back from a solo trip to Ventura, and she told me she could never go to a movie or on a trip alone, that she would just feel too weird. This is likely not you if you are a son or daughter of a CNP. You like being alone. This is because at some point you needed to get away from your parent, and that's when you discovered the positive aspects of solitude. It's not loneliness for you, it's freedom. Because of that, you don't fear being alone, and that is huge. That is power. That means you won't make friends or get in relationships just to fill your time. No, not you. Every connection that you make has meaning to it, and that translates to a very full life. Now, if you've employed some of the tools I've mentioned in previous episodes, such as Polite Robot, you're also likely a good communicator. Because CNPs react so strongly to any upsurge of negative emotion, you've had to be very level-headed during conversation. As a result, you've had nothing but your words to communicate. There was more weight on the content of what you were saying, so you had to be crystal clear every time. Now, for example, I'm a writer, and one of the things that has honed my skill in that area is talking to my CNP. One of the strategies I use when my parent is on a narcissistic rant is I will repeat what was said using different words. This allows me to respond, acknowledge what my CNP has said, but not agree with it. As you can imagine, over years, my vocabulary got really good. I also became really adept at constructing sentences on the fly because, like I mentioned, I had to do this in live conversation. Another lesson you were exposed to early on is the duplicitous nature of life, sometimes called bifurcation. So by this, I mean you are well aware that any single person, experience, thing, or idea can have both positive and negative aspects. You can have both deep love and gratitude, as well as deep fear and resentment towards your parent. You recognize that your parent treated you well, Maybe they taught you about rock and roll or any number of wonderful things. But you also know that they gaslighted you, were mean to you, made you doubt yourself. It's a sad lesson to learn so early on because that means as a kid, you knew that nothing was 100%. A great day could turn bad instantly with a CNP due to their precarious triggers, and vice versa. In a sense, your innocence was cut short here, and that is really unfortunate. I have a kind of funny personal example here. I remember during the Monica Lewinsky-Bill Clinton scandal, I was about 8 to 10 years old. Not old enough to totally understand everything, but old enough to know that Clinton had done something he wasn't supposed to do. I remember thinking, even in my pre-adolescent brain, well, he has another girlfriend, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad president or didn't do good things for the country. Now that's a way, way mature thought for a 9-year-old, but I attribute that ability to separate the behavior from the person to my upbringing with a CNP. Now, if you think back to your childhood, I bet you'll find some instances where your thinking was pretty advanced beyond your years. By navigating life with a CNP, you gained a mature outlook on the complexities of life, something most people don't develop until much later on. You also, in a way, have the gift of non-attachment in the spiritual sense. You don't tie yourself too much to any joy or despair because you know, like your CNP's mood, it can change on a dime. This gift also affords you an ocean's depth of emotion. Because you've been put through the emotional ringer with your CNP, you've felt far more feelings than the average person in your time on Earth. You're able to relate and empathize very well, partially because of the breadth of your emotion and partially because you are accustomed to figuring out how another person is feeling. Your parent was covert and confusing, so you learned how to be emotionally analytical and inquisitive early on. And then once you get on the other side of surviving your childhood and your CNP, the gifts get better, I promise. One of the best things I learned throughout my own healing was that I cannot change anyone. Now this is different than saying people cannot change. They definitely can, or I think they can. But it's gonna happen on their own time, if ever. I can't tell you how many times I'd read and heard that advice from others. But it was only after exhaustive efforts spent over decades to make my CNP happy, to prevent them from being so angry and miserable, that I just gave up and gave in. When I say gave in, I don't mean saying that they're right. I mean giving in as in accepting that this is just who they are. It's not your responsibility to make anyone else happy. And even if it were, it's just not possible. Happiness comes from inside that person, not from their son or daughter acquiescing or proving a point. So you can argue your CNP circumstance all you want. You can point out all the things they have to be grateful for. If they don't want to see it because they're comfortable in their victimhood, even the most perfect family and circumstance is not going to shake them loose. The sooner you accept this, the better and lighter your life is going to be. And then the next step is you're going to take all that energy you spent trying to convince them and prove yourself. You take that energy and you use it on yourself, and you use it to serve others who appreciate it. You give it to people who listen and respect you. When you can stand in your own gratitude, values, and happiness, and give up the ghost of trying to change your CNP, when you can do these two things at the same time, that's the money spot. Your childhood should have been different. And as I said in the beginning of this episode, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was somehow meant to be. But I hope what I mentioned today helps you see the very special gifts you acquired. Not acquired, earned throughout your life with a CNP. These gifts that you've honed can be used in so many ways. Take them, and instead of giving them to your CNP like you've done all these years, give them to yourself. You deserve it more than anyone. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of My Emotional Armor. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave a review. And if you have any topics you'd like to hear about on the show, please fill out the contact form online at myemotionalarmor.com. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay safe and armored up.